Hi! I posted a poll last week to find out what is the most popular tie-off knot used by racket stringers. And I'd like to thank all of you that responded with your vote. So I listed the three most popular knots: the double half-hitch, the Wilson Pro Knot, and a Parnell Knot. So here are the results. 10% voted for the double half-hitch, 22% the Wilson Pro Knot, and 68% with the Parnell Knot. Now I listed a couple of other options where they could vote for their own signature knot, or if there was any other knot that I wasn't aware of, and no one voted in those two categories. Throughout my stringing career, I've used all three of these knots, and I thought I would share my experience and my insight with you. All right, let's get into it. All right, so before we get into these three knots, I did want to go over some of my recommended do's and don'ts. And you want to make sure you have the proper tool when you're cinching up a knot. And my preferred tool is a parallel jaw pliers. And if you've watched my other videos, you've seen me use this tool. And I've also done a video on tools of the trade, so you can check it out there. One of the things I like about this is that you get a nice, really firm grip on the string. You do have to be careful when you're pulling up on the string to not rotate the pliers, because it does have a sharp edge and you can break the string. But it has a very small head right here, so you can get into really tight spots. The second tool that I see a lot of stringers use is a starting clamp. And one good thing about it is that the edges are a little bit rounder, so you don't have that sharp edge that might break the strings. The only thing about a starting clamp is that the head is so wide that if you ever get into a tight spot, it's harder to get into a tight spot. And I'll demonstrate it later with this wide head. Another option is cam action pliers. Now this tool is specifically made for cinching up a knot, and this round part is what you would rest against the frame as you rock it back to cinch it up. So you get a lot of good leverage, but this is just an extra tool that I'd rather not have in my tool tray, and it's kind of big, so I don't use this tool. Now the other thing I wanted to recommend is whenever you're cinching up a knot, especially if you're using a starting clamp or a parallel jaw pliers, is to have your hand underneath the plier or starting clamp, because you'll get a lot more leverage pulling up this way than if you were to place your hand on top of the pliers or starting clamp. So that's something to pay attention to. The other thing is you want to make sure that when you cut the knot tail, that you keep it within 1/8 to 3/16 of an inch. You never want the knot tail to go beyond the frame itself. And the fourth thing that I would recommend is on the cutting pliers is to use a bypass cutting pliers. So this is the Xuron cutting pliers that I use. And the bypass, the blades, what happens, it's like a scissor, so they actually don't come up flush. They bypass each other, so it works like a scissor. So I feel like with this you get a lot cleaner cut, and you don't get that crown at the end of the knot tail. All right, so here are some don'ts that that I wouldn't recommend. Is that you should never use your tension head to cinch up the knots. I mean, after you tie it, to pull it tight. In fact, on the USRSA certification test, if you use that, then that's a failure. Speaking about the USRSA, they don't recommend that you actually increase the last string before tying off. That's their opinion, because it's out of the plane area. So, but a lot of machines have the knot function, and I use it. I go up 5 pounds on my machine. So that's a matter of stringer's preference. So the goal is to always tie off your 2 outer mains or 2 outer crosses. Now, if you're stringing a natural one piece or around the world, that's when you can encounter sometimes tying off one main and not the other if you're running the crosses with the long side. Or if you're stringing an around the world, you might have a tie off with same situation. So if you want to check out my video on install crosses faster and reduce friction, and my around the world with the twist, you can check it out to see how I avoid that situation. All right, let's start off with a double half hitch knot. And this is a knot that probably a lot of stringers used when they're starting to string. And this is what I used for many years. So I have the anchor string here. And the string that I just sent through the grommet is the tie-off string. So basically what you're going to do is just make sure you go over the anchor string and then back under. And you're going to be doing that twice. So that's the double half hitch. So you can actually form the knot that way and then just tighten the first half hitch. And again, I'm going to use my parallel jaw pliers. And when you're pulling, you want to make sure that you're pulling up. In this case, I don't want to turn my pliers because that'll risk the chance of it breaking. And the same with a starting clamp. In general, you just want to pull straight up. And you can just make sure that it's nice and tight. And do the same. Sorry, I moved the camera. Do the same with the second half hitch. And then what you're going to do with all knots is always release the base and then the top of the string clamps. So I have a picture of what the knot should look like there. The mistake that some stringers can make, especially if you're inexperienced, is that you're going to be tying that double half hitch with the second half hitch in the opposite direction. So I'm going to demonstrate that on the other side. So you typically want about a foot length of string to tie off a knot to tie it off comfortably. But one of the pros of this double half hitch knot is that you can actually get by with a very short length of string. So I'm going to cut this really short just to demonstrate. So I'm going to give myself about 3 inches of string to tie off this knot. I'm actually going to do it improperly, but at the same time use only 3 inches of string. So I'm going to cut it off there. And what I'm going to do is just, again, I'm going to send it through the hole. All right, so you can see the string length here. Now we're down to about 2 inches of string. So if I can't use my fingers, I'll have to use the pliers, but let's try this first. And so I can get that first half hitch, and I'm going to go ahead and tighten that because I don't have much string to form the knot and be able to have both loops. So you can see that with my parallel jaw pliers, I can pull that right away. So I want to get that nice and tight. And then so now I can get the second half hitch formed. And so like in this case, you can see that I barely have enough, I can't use my fingers, or I could, but I'm just going to use the bent nose pliers to just gonna help get that string through that loop. Oh, so I was supposed to do this improperly. So I went around this way to the left of the anchor string and back through. So now I'm going to actually go to the right. So this is how you would tie the this knot improperly. So this feels kind of awkward because I normally don't do it this way. But I'll go ahead and try and get that string through that loop there. So I'm going to have to use my bent nose pliers to get that through that loop, and I'm bringing it through there. Now I'm down to about 1 inch length of string there, and I can tighten this here. So it has a different look compared to the other side, and you'll see it in the picture there, but that would be a double half hitch knot tied improperly. And you can tell a lot of times not only the shape, but you'll see that the knot tail will angle its way towards the inside of the string bed. I did want to mention a couple of cons with the double half hitch knot, and sometimes over time the first half hitch can get sucked into the grommet hole. The second thing is that the second half hitch sometimes actually can undo itself if it wasn't cinched up tightly to begin with. Before I get into the next knot, I did want to talk a little bit about the application of using a starting clamp. And a lot of stringers prefer to use this by clamping on the outside of the frame, pulling tension, and then tying off. And the reason mainly is to reduce the stress that's placed on the anchor string. So I did another video where I compared the Babolat starting clamp, the Yonex starting clamp, and there was a third one, an Alpha badminton starting clamp. So these are all excellent. And when I did that test, it was to mainly see how much deformation there was in the string after the string, the starting clamp was removed from the string. And what that can do to harm the string is that if you place it right next to the frame, And after you're ready to tie off the string and you release the starting clamp, there is deformation in the string right here, and that can cause weakness and premature breakage. And the reason why is that when you tie off, that's the section that's going to bend over into the next grommet. So that's, again, that's a stress point that can cause the string to break. So a way to remedy that is to use something like an offset tube or some kind of spacer. But this offset tube allows you to place the starting clamp further away from the area where the string will be bending. So in this case, I could place it right here. I would tension the string, and then when I'm ready to tie off, I would just remove this and go ahead and tie off. All right, so the next knot I'm tying is a Wilson Pro knot. And one of the advantages of this knot, it's a compact knot. And you can see that I have a very small gap between the main string that's intersecting the cross and the grommet. And you can see part of the string popping through. So I'm going to go ahead and push it through. And I'll apologize in advance if I bump into the camera. So I have this string coming through here. And this knot, like the double half hitch, is going to start off with a half hitch. So I'm going to go ahead and go over the anchor string, under, and then back through and form that half hitch. But I'm going to leave enough of a space so that what I'm going to do is send this tail end through the back or underneath that loop. So that's basically it. So you're just going to pull or cinch this up right here. So I'm going to go ahead, sorry, I'm bumping into that camera. All right, so yeah, I'm going to cinch this knot here and pull it here. And what I'm always going to do is make sure that and I'm going to hold this in place right here before as I'm releasing the base and the string clamp on top. So this is a very compact knot. Now I like it for that, but the cons with this knot is because it's a small knot, sometimes it actually can pull through the hole. Like I mentioned on the half hitch, it can literally just pull through, especially if the gauge of the string is very thin or if you're stringing it at a very high tension. All right, so here's the tie-off knot that 68% of you mentioned that you use as your tie-off knot, and this is the Parnell knot. And full transparency, when I first learned how to string, I used a double half hitch. Then I switched to the Wilson Pro knot, but then I was finding that sometimes I had to use the Parnell knot when I needed something bulkier so that the knot wouldn't slip through the grommet. So the way you tie this is you start off with a half hitch, just like the other two knots, and then you're going to leave enough of a loop so that when you send the string back down under, instead of tying the second half hitch, you just go right through that first loop that you formed. And then when you tighten it, you're going to pull that first half hitch, and then you're going to pull the tail end second. Now another good thing about this knot, besides being bulkier, is that it's self-tightening. And what I mean by that is that if you take a look at the string coming through the grommet right here, it might be hard to see, but what happens is that it's looping over, and it's actually passing over or actually tightening the second, the tail end. So when you cinch up this knot, eventually what's going to happen is the tension that's coming from the string that you're going to release the tension with the clamp is actually pulling on the tail end. So it does tighten the knot even more. So when you take a look at the double half hitch knot, it has the same kind of bulk, but the second knot is tied after the first one is cinched up. So in this case, when you cinch up this knot, it's actually pulling it even tighter. So hopefully that makes sense. In this video, I covered the 3 most popular tie-off knots. And in summary, the advantage of a double half hitch knot is that it can be tied with a very short length of string. For the Wilson Pro knot, it can be tied when you have a very small space, and the Parnell knot as the most versatile and all-around knot. So I hope you found this video helpful. Thanks for watching. Happy stringing! and let your strings play.